You either run from things, or you face them, Mr. White.
What exactly does that mean?
I learned it in rehab. It's all about accepting who you really are. I accept who I am.
And who are you?
I'm the bad guy.
When it comes to Breaking Bad's many imperfect characters, none are as flawed as Jesse Pinkman. From avoiding responsibility and having a lack of direction in life to using drugs and pleasure to escape problems, Jesse Pinkman's character eerily resembles today's average young man. Sure, most men nowadays do not turn to criminal activities or have it as bad as Jesse, but most can notice more parts of themselves in Jesse than in a character like Mike Ehrmantraut, who is more mature and competent. The immaturity of who Jesse Pinkman was in the beginning is like a stage in many lives of men nowadays, but unfortunately many men do not escape this stage and as a result are stuck in life. So why is this immaturity plaguing the modern man? Why do we relate to Jesse Pinkman so much? And more importantly, was there redemption for Jesse, and can there be an antidote to immaturity for young men as a whole? In this video, I will analyze the character of Jesse Pinkman and also discuss how immaturity and lack of effort to become mature are extremely damaging to men. Jesse Pinkman is a high school dropout and a small-time methamphetamine producer who becomes deeply entangled in the dangerous drug trade. Initially portrayed as a reckless and immature character, Jesse's journey throughout the series reveals his complexity as he grapples with responsibility, guilt, addiction, failure, degeneracy, and nihilism. Despite his flaws, Jesse Pinkman eventually experiences some growth, but before that, we need to analyze the stage of immaturity. As mentioned, a lot of men, especially young men, are immature nowadays. Of course, maturity only comes after immaturity, but as mentioned also, more and more men in today's world get stuck in the former stage and sadly do not try to improve until it's too late. There are three key things that are prevalent in the modern world that summon this immaturity or childishness: comfort, lack of meaning, and demoralization. Usually, all of these coexist, creating childlike behavior in a person who should have already grown up. The main problem is the lack of meaning. Think about when you were a kid. Everything seemed to last forever. You had a lot of freedom to seemingly do way more than what you do now, and everything was exciting, new, and comfortable. However, we all know this fairy tale of childhood doesn't last, and as we grow up, we have to accept the way the world works and take up the responsibility to do something meaningful with our lives. The issue comes when a person grows up physically but stagnates when it comes to mental growth. This comes from a lack of purpose. But when you don't have meaning in your life, you still crave it either consciously or subconsciously. Meaning can be explained by being in a state of flow, feeling that you are in the right place at the right time and feeling content with your life. We all naturally want this, but meaning takes a lot of work and projection for the future. That's why this lack of meaning that is so prevalent in young men nowadays can be the result of trying to find an easy way toward meaning by hiding in comfort. Drugs, junk food, pornography, casual sex, laziness, all of these things are comfortable and go against what maturity requires. It's so easy to have all of these things nowadays that in the short term make you feel that you are in the right place at the right time. However, we pay the price for this easy life. Most men are more lonely, stressed, anxious, and depressed than ever before, and I believe it all stems from discomfort, lack of meaning, and demoralization. Demoralization or being demoralized comes from this lack of purpose and increased engagement in comfortable behavior. One loses sight of what is important, what life could truly be. We learn to associate pleasure with goodness and pain with badness, which ends up keeping us stuck in that cycle of those three things that spawn childishness. This brings us to Jesse Pinkman and how the lack of proper direction kept him stuck in the web of immaturity. Let's start off with the outside and surface perspective of Jesse Pinkman. Despite being 24 years old in the earlier seasons of Breaking Bad, Jesse dresses and talks like a teenager. He wears oversized clothing indicative of a hip-hop style and talks in a way that you would expect a high school student to talk.
Hey, come on, yo. Come on, yo, can you please?
Yo,
responsibilities.
Yo.
Now, of course, there is no official way an adult should dress or talk, but probably most of us can agree that the way Jesse carries carries himself is not a sign of a mature man. A good example of this would be to see the difference between Jesse and his high school friend when Jesse gets kicked out of his aunt's house and asks that friend to crash with him. We can see that Jesse's friend has a wife and a kid and looks like an actual adult, indicating responsibility and maturity compared to how Jesse looks in this scene. Also, Jesse's friend's wife instantly reads Jesse's demeanor and convinces her husband not to let Jesse stay with them.
You got other people to call? Hey, no, that's cool. I got tons of people, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Of course, this is just a small detail that I wanted to point out, but now let's get into what really inhibited Jesse's growth.
What's the point of being an outlaw when you got responsibilities?
One of the main things that turn boys into men is the responsibility. Taking up responsibility marks the end of being taken care of, or at least minimizing that and starting to care for something or someone yourself. When we are first introduced to Jesse Pinkman, we see the negative effects of irresponsibility, the mentioned way of dressing and talking, but there are other examples as well. After being suspicious of Walter White, Skylar White tracks the phone number of Jesse Pinkman and finds his My Shout page where Jesse openly flaunts drug use, casual sex, and his obsession with MILFs.
Hell is a MILF?
Scrolling further down, Skylar and we see that there are two sections: general interests and education. This is where we see the real tragedy of immaturity for Jesse Pinkman. As much as he'd like to appear careless about the rules and laws or appear cool and not needing responsibilities, deep down Jesse craves to be competent and responsible. He most likely lied about being a blue belt in Kung Fu and definitely lied about going to a university. Why would he lie about himself if he actually thought that he was as cool as he presented himself on the webpage? This shows that as much as a young man would like to hide behind the shield of coolness, deep down he craves the skills and abilities that could only be gained through actual responsibility. In fact, we can see Jesse becoming enraged multiple times throughout the series when he's reminded of being a failure and irresponsible when he doesn't want to be that way. Also, whenever Jesse actually receives a compliment or somebody recognizes some skill or potential in him, it always results in deep meaning for Jesse, a fact that Walter White uses a lot to manipulate Jesse.
Your meth is good, Jesse. As good as mine.
Unfortunately, at the start, Jesse lacks with taking any amount of responsibility and just blames the outside world or people. A few good examples would be when Walter and Jesse think about what to do with Crazy 8. Jesse blames Walter for the entire situation.
Man, okay, this whole thing was your
Don't you dare put that on me!
And when Jesse and Walter go to cook in the desert, where because of Jesse's carelessness, they both get stuck in the desert.
Whoa, no, this is not my fault, alright? The buzzer didn't buzz.
Actually, that whole episode captures irresponsibility of Jesse very well, as throughout the whole episode, Jesse keeps messing up, but instead of taking responsibility and admitting his mistakes, he either blames the outside circumstances or Walter. Jesse's irresponsibility could also be seen in this smaller example. In the very first episode of Breaking Bad, when Walter gives Jesse money to buy an RV, there is a callback to the episode in Season 3, Episode 5, where it is revealed that Jesse didn't go to buy the RV first. Jesse went out with his friends to party, and only by luck was he able to get an RV. However, we can see the real detrimental effects of the irresponsibility and immaturity of Jesse Pinkman in the Jane Margolis storyline. It is debated in the Breaking Bad community whether Jane really loved Jesse or was only using him for his money, and you are free to leave your thoughts down in the comments below, but I believe she was using him for sex and money, and here are a few arguments for that. After the incident with the junkies, Jesse is outside checking out a drawing that Jane did when this one guy stops and compliments Jesse vaguely, but clearly indicating that what they think Jesse did is known around the town. This intrigues Jane as she starts to see that Jesse has some sort of status and is not just a nobody. Plus, she also learns Jesse's true last name, which he lied about, but is not mad about it or concerned as other people would be in her situation. In fact, when Jesse brags about installing a new TV in the house later on and invites Jane to check it out, she agrees to go with him, which leads them to have sex. Finally, the way Jane reacts to how much money Jesse actually makes, and upon seeing that money instantly tries to offer for both of them to get away and start a new life, is a bit suspicious and seems to serve more hers than Jesse's needs, as she wanted to escape her protective dad and without money was dependent on the dad. On the other hand, you could have counter arguments for all of these things. Maybe Jane related to Jesse as she saw herself in him, a lonely guy her age who had trouble with his family living right next to her. Maybe she actually wanted to start a life with Jesse and just wanted independence for both of them. But if we're not talking about the money, an obvious red flag was when Jane didn't want to introduce Jesse to her father and responded to Jesse addressing their relationship as,
"Who's you and me?"
The response about the status of their relationship was especially alarming, as it means that she didn't actually feel much emotion for Jesse and wasn't looking for a future with him, only using Jesse for sex or money, or both. You can look at it any way you prefer, but the main point in the Jane storyline was that Jesse still handled the whole situation in an irresponsible and immature way. Blinded by the affection and physical attractiveness of Jane, Jesse instantly lashed on to Jane, not seeing the red flags along the way. Jane provided Jesse with the comfort of somebody liking him, unlike his family. This created an illusion for Jesse, as it does for many young men nowadays. Pleasure over meaning. Being with Jane felt really good for Jesse, but it would have been obviously a short-term thing for the reasons mentioned before, and also when they started doing drugs. Walter, even though most likely doing this for selfish reasons, tried to warn Jesse that this won't end in a good way, them having the money and being addicted to drugs. But Jesse was too powerless to look at the reality, as he had a person who seemingly let him escape the reality and feel good. Jesse couldn't see that there was no future with Jane, kept doing drugs with her, and agreed to get away with her when in fact he should have just stayed and dealt with the problems there. Jane, of course, wasn't the person that put Jesse in a state of nihilism and constant escapism into drugs. That person was Jesse himself.
What's it all mean? What's the point?
Nihilism, or the belief that life is meaningless, could be considered one of the most dangerous sicknesses of the mind, especially in today's world's young men and society as a whole. Many young guys don't have a proper direction or philosophy for life, rendering them to find the poor man's version of meaning, comfort, and pleasure. This results in guys doing drugs, playing video games, watching porn, or just anything else that could take the edge off when facing the inevitable hardships of life. Nihilism and escapism into pleasure are also the main signs of immaturity, and Jesse Pinkman suffers from both. There are countless examples of Jesse facing some sort of obstacle in his life, and instead of overcoming the obstacle and developing meaning, for the most part, Jesse chooses to escape the discomfort or pain of said obstacle by doing drugs. Depending on the severity of a problem Jesse is facing, he will degrade as much to cope. When Combo was killed, Jesse smokes weed. When Jane died, Jesse was found laying in a junkie house high on heroin by Walter. When Jesse had to kill Gail, Jesse trashed his whole house by inviting random people and doing drugs with them every day after returning from his work in the lab. There were moments when Jesse would be clean for a period of time, but it was almost never his choice to be so, and either was because the circumstances required or other people kept him clean for Jesse not to mess anything up. A famous Austrian psychiatrist, Viktor Frankl, once said, "When a person can find a deep sense of meaning, they distract themselves with pleasure." These words very accurately describe Jesse and his inability to grow up and face reality. Unfortunately, this is not the last part of the degrading immaturity found in Jesse Pinkman's character. There is a saying, "You are what you hang out with." This saying holds especially true in Jesse's case. If we take a look at Skinny Pete, Combo, and Badger, friends Jesse hangs out with throughout the series, we can see that all of them are very similar. They all have similar goals, struggles, and interests. However, what separates Jesse Pinkman from his friends is his family and location background. When we see Jesse's family's house, we see that it's in a nice neighborhood, and Jesse's parents are seemingly wealthy. Compared to his friends, Jesse's background doesn't seem to have started in the streets, where the living conditions could have increased the chances of a person pursuing criminal activities just to survive. Although all people eventually choose the path they take, they can be influenced by their environment to choose the wrong path. In Jesse's case, this path seemingly was for him to choose, and he couldn't be the victim of circumstance. He chose the street life, perhaps seeing that it was easier and void of responsibility. In El Camino, Jesse actually admits this to his parents and takes up responsibility, indicating his growth. And yes, Jesse Pinkman eventually somewhat evolves and grows up, leaving this tragedy of immaturity behind him. So now let's talk about that stage. The main sign of immaturity is irresponsibility, and the main sign of growth is the opposite of that, responsibility. Although pain can be a great teacher, and for Jesse it was definitely needed to start growing up, Jesse starts to grow once he gets into a relationship with Andrea. Sure, he first aimed to just get high with her and sell meth, but over time, after many events, Jesse ends up with a deep sense of meaning from spending time with Andrea and taking care of her son Brock.
And the way she looks at you. Oh, you think? Oh, definitely.
Jesse now had actual responsibility in his life and was improving because of that, and although the Andrea storyline ended tragically, Jesse still grew because of it. Of course, Jesse's growth is not linear, and before Andrea, Jesse is presented with another way to mature, hanging out with Mike Ehrmantraut. What started as a way to babysit Jesse Pinkman by the order of Gustavo Fring for Mike Ehrmantraut ends up in Jesse becoming a competent part of Gustavo's circle.
So maybe I'm not such a loser after all.
Even though at first it was about manipulating Jesse into conspiring against Walter White, Jesse quickly proved to Fring that he actually learned in terms of doing the job and cooking meth. This newly found responsibility provided Jesse with meaning and improvement. During this time, Jesse also started dressing less like a hip-hop rapper wannabe and more like an actual adult. However, all of this is nothing compared to what I believe is the moment when Jesse Pinkman showed that he was not the weak, immature boy he used to be, by admitting responsibility to his parents in El Camino.
Well, you did your best.
And whatever happened with me, it's on me, okay? Nobody else.
Although it may not look like an important moment, I think this is a powerful conclusion to Jesse's character. All of the time Jesse spent escaping into drugs from responsibility and blaming his parents, the outside world, and other people for why he is the way he is, the acceptance of who he is, and the lift of responsibility from his parents' shoulders shows that Jesse is now mature, and all of the stuff that happened to him didn't destroy him. In conclusion, Jesse Pinkman is a very realistic and flawed character. His story is a tragedy of being immature, not taking responsibility, not looking for meaning, not seeing the reality for what it is, constantly escaping into pleasure, and not being able to grow up. At least at the start. We can see that taking up responsibility and going through hardships of life eventually led Jesse to mature, and in the end, he was no longer escaping into drugs or anything else. He just accepted his past and escaped the law by going someplace where he could start a new life, hopefully a better life. Even though it is left for discussion and speculation what happened to Jesse, or Mr. Driscoll, when he arrived in Alaska, the story of Jesse symbolizes the life of many young men nowadays, with clear consequences of what can happen if you try to take the easy way of not growing up, and what you can achieve if you decide to take the path of maturity. Thank you so much for watching this video. I think it could be really fun if all of you guys watching this video could leave your theories down below of what you think may have happened to Jesse after that final shot of him driving away. Did you think that he started a better life, or maybe he just fell back into his old habits, old degenerate habits, and found himself in more unfavorable circumstances? Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe for more future videos. And if you want to watch another video essay analysis of another Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul character, I have one on Mike Ehrmantraut and how he symbolizes the traditional masculinity. And if you want to watch that, click the top right corner of the screen right now, or check the link in the description. And that's pretty much it. As always, meaning is always above pleasure.